Adolescence has just hit Netflix, and it's a show that I've been looking forward to from the moment that the trailer dropped a couple of weeks back. With a single take shot style, this show explored the different perspectives over the course of a 13-month period where a young girl named Kate was murdered by Jamie, and the impact that it had around both the murderer and the victim. From the students in the school, to Jamie himself, to the family of Jamie, and also the professionals that were handling the case. This wasn't just a murder case though. This show used the theme of incel culture and toxic masculinity at the heart of the story, and the influence it had on the reason as to why Jamie committed those acts. So with that, let's dive into the show and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is a review of Adolescence and the ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The final episode's importance. When it came to the ending of the show, what was particularly interesting was that it was kind of like a life after effect in showing how the family of Jamie were living their day-to-day lives 13 months after he was first arrested. Even though Jamie was the person who committed the murder and he came from an extremely normal background, we saw that his family were all being tarnished by the same brush as what he was, leading them to ultimately question if they did a good enough job as parents and to wonder if they could have intercepted at any point and done anything differently whilst raising him to have prevented the murder from taking place. We saw how the effect of what Jamie did appeared multiple times throughout the day and caught the family members off guard when they least expected it. For example, when Eddie opened up his birthday card, it was from Jamie, something that instantly took his mind back to then. His van had an insult written on it, and also Jamie called from inside of the facility later on that day. What was interesting about the phone call occurring after arguably the climax of the episode, where Eddie confronted the kids that vandalized his van, threw paint all over the car and threatened the security guard, was that he was calm, collected, and was acting as if everything was just normal. Showing that he was still protecting his son in some capacity, despite the fact that the very reason that their lives were in turmoil and were each individually being impacted in multiple different ways was on the other end of the phone call. We also got to focus on the fact that it didn't take evil to produce evil. For example, Eddie said how his father used to beat him when he was younger and he made the decision to treat his own son differently, yet he turned out to be a murderer. When also, with the same parental approach, on the other side, there was Jamie's sister, who was extremely normal when compared to her brother, showing that it wasn't necessarily a byproduct of how Jamie was raised. The ending of this episode was one which was extremely bleak, and with Eddie breaking down on his son's bed and apologizing to his son's Teddy and saying that he should have done better, it showed a side where even the family of the murderers' lives are transformed forever and can live to blame themselves for the acts that their offspring commits. The impact on D.I. Bascombes' life. One part of the show that struck a chord and stood out to me was D.I. Bascombes' arc. Despite leading the investigation about the murder of Kate, we saw that he was also a father that was caught up in work and knew full well that he'd been neglecting parts of his relationship with his son, Adam. As in episode 2, we saw that when he was walking around the school and looking to find information about where the murder weapon was located, his son approached him and was the person that told him all about the Incel label, the content that people were exposed to online, and that it was most likely what drove Jamie to commit the murder. It was at the end of the episode, after he ran after Ryan and got him arrested, where he realized that he needed to be more present in his son's life. This was because a fear almost arrived in his head that if he wasn't aware what he was up to, how he was being treated at school, then he could have ended up like what Jamie did and being driven to the point of doing something that he'd later go on to regret. D.I. Bascombe and Eddie weren't all that different, as we came to find out in the end, in the sense that they were both extremely busy with work, which meant that they weren't able to spend a lot of time with their son. And we also saw that Adam was being bullied and called names, just like it seemed Jamie could have been. So it showed that both Eddie and Bascombe's parental approaches weren't really that different. The environmental factor of their children going to the same school was the same, but there were completely different outcomes, maybe due to the susceptibility to the content that they were consuming and how it altered their minds. Episode 3. Episode 3 could well be the standout episode of the show for me. We saw that Bryony was essentially interviewing Jamie to determine the type of person that he was, and it was in this episode where not only did we see a phenomenal performance by Erin Doherty as the psychologist, but we also saw the true side to Jamie, the evil mindset that he had, and the view that he held towards women due to him believing that he was unattractive and that it was their fault for holding that view. There were many moments in this episode where we got a true insight into the mind of the character, such as when he was stressing about if Bryony liked him, despite the fact that he was taking pleasure in scaring her. Him wanting assurance that he wasn't ugly when she wouldn't say that he wasn't. Him being derogatory towards women and judging them solely on their looks. And us also seeing that before Kate was killed, he saw a weakness in her due to photos of her being shared around the school, and he ultimately tried to utilize that to his advantage by seeing if she wanted to go out with him, but she ultimately laughed him away. Bryony mentioned herself that she didn't take pride in being the quickest person to give an assessment on somebody, but she wanted to provide the most effective assessment of a character that was true to who they were, and we saw that she got that, as she managed to get Jamie into a place where he felt comfortable and he spoke about the night that Kate died, and he admitted that he killed her. He almost framed it in a way where when he killed her, he could have done anything to her body, but he chose not to, as if that made him any better. The focus on sound in this episode was something that was really strongly executed. The outside noise of the wind and rain would often play as tension was getting higher, and then when it came to Jamie actually revealing what happened, it fell silent, and we heard the breaths of Bryony at the forefront of the room, as if to show that she had Jamie right where she wanted him, and she wanted to make sure that what she said next continued the train of confession that he was going on. However, alongside that, it also encapsulated the fear that was running through her body. Hence why at the end of the episode it almost felt like there was a large exhale from her. Her time came to an end with Jamie in this session, and she was simply disgusted by him, his behaviour, his actions, and his views. And that was shown by the stunned silence, the fact that she needed to take a minute, and also the fact that when she went to pick up the sandwich that he ate, she threw it back down because she couldn't bear to touch something that he'd touched. Showing that throughout the entirety of the episode she was a professional, and then, at the end, her true human side and her views showed. The theme of the show. This series at its core felt like it was about the impact that many different influencers and videos that get created that promote toxic masculinity and the whole mindset of an incel can have on the young impressionable people that consume them. To be honest, I felt like Bascombe when it was first being described because I had no idea what any of those emojis meant. But at the heart of the show, it was all about the power that a harmless video can have, and the ripple effect of what happens when people are exposed to them. It also shone a light on the lack of control that parents have over their children with what they consume and the influence that the school environment can have on the students. One could argue that Jamie was a subject to the external environment that he was in and the content that he consumed. He came from a normal home with loving parents, as we saw, because Lisa didn't turn out to be a murderer. So it really did show the power that content can have. Indoctrination is a thing, and like we've seen throughout history with many different agendas, people are able to get indoctrinated into a system of beliefs, whether right or wrong, through the use of content per se. And it felt like this show put a focus on that. My review of the show. I thought this was a really good series. I don't think it was this masterpiece like I'm seeing many other people saying, but I think it was a really powerful piece of television that got its message across in a way that was extremely easy to digest. It was very creative and it was impressive to watch. The choice of making this all single-take shot style was a smart move. It allowed the tension to be ever present whilst the story was unfolding, and in a show that felt like there was mystery at the heart of it, this was something that was amplified further through that technique. Stephen Graham was a standout as per usual, but to be honest, I expect nothing less from him now. He never fails to deliver when he's on screen, and this was one of the best things that I've seen him in for quite a while. In fact, this had a few faces from 1,000 Blows in it, such as Erin Doherty and also his wife that appeared in that show too. It almost feels like this is one of the first shows to really focus on toxic masculinity in the present day amongst school kids and how the content that they consume can have a lasting effect on them and the way that they act. And I thought it wasn't only refreshing, but it was a needed medium for that talking point to be explored. 4 episodes was definitely the right amount for this show because it was extremely heavy and the single-take nature of it made it feel heavier than what it actually was. Because with there being no cuts, it almost feels like there's no respite for the mind. This show is definitely worth a watch. It's one of the best things Netflix has put out in a long while. They've been lacking a bit recently, so it was nice to have something to thoroughly enjoy whilst watching. So, there you have it, a review of Adolescence and the ending explained.